Hello, this is Morel Bernard with Christmas Story, New York Burglar and the Blizzard. Last words were who he wondered was touching it now. And by the way, please subscribe and please share these videos. Much appreciated. Thank you. Jeffrey was one of those who act best and naturally without delay. Now he hesitated not at all. He had the keys of the house in his pocket, and he moved quickly toward a side door, which he remembered swung silently on its hinges. It was not so much that he believed that there was anyone in the house. Perhaps to the most apprehensive a burglar comes as a surprise, but he felt he had too good grounds for suspicion to fail to investigate. He unlocked the door without a sound. As he stepped within, doubt was put an end to by the patch of a white light that, streaming out of the library door, fell across the passageway before him. He stooped down and took off his boots, and then cautiously approached the open door and looked in, knowing that darkness and preparation were in his favor. His caution was unnecessary, for his entrance had not been heard. The Hillsborough theory of the femininity of the burglar instantly fell to the ground. A man of medium size was standing before one of the bookcases with his elbow resting near the clock. He was holding a volume in his hands with the careful ease of a book fancier. The man's back was turned so that a sandy head and a strongly built figure were all Jeffrey could make out. Had it not been for a glimpse of a mask on his face, he might have been a student at work. So intent did he appear that Jeffrey could not resist the temptation to make his entrance dramatic. Creeping almost to the other's elbow, revolver in hand, he said gently, "Fond of reading?" The man, naturally startled, made a surprising quick movement towards his own revolver and had it knocked out of his hand with a benumbing blow. Jeffrey secured the weapon, and seeing the man's retreat may be excused for supposing the struggle over. He underestimated his adversary's resources, for the burglar, retreating with a look of surrender, came within reach of the electric light, turned it off, and fled in the total darkness that followed. Jeffrey sprang to the switch, but the few seconds that his fingers were fumbling for it told against him. When he turned it on, the room was empty. The door by which the thief had gone open on the main hall and not on the passageway, so that Jeffrey still had time to secure the outer door. Next, he lit the chandelier in the hall, but its illumination told nothing. It was Jeffrey's own sharp ears that told him of light footsteps beyond the turn of the stairs. Here Holland recognized at once that the burglar had a great advantage. The flight of stairs from the hall reached the upper story at a point very near where the back stairs came up, while they descended to widely different places in the lower story, so that the burglar, looking down, could choose his flight of stairs as soon as he saw his pursuer committed to the other, and thus reach the lower hall with several seconds to spare. Fortunately, however, Jeffrey remembered that there was a door at the foot of the back stairs. With incredible quickness, he turned off the light again, threw his boots upstairs in the ingenious hope that the sound would give the effect of his own ascent, dashed round and locked the door at the foot of the stairs, and then, at the top of his speed, ran up the front stairs and down the back. The result was somewhat as he expected. The burglar had reached the door at the foot of the stairs, and finding it locked, was halfway up again when he and Jeffrey met. The impetus of Jeffrey's descent carried the man backward. They both landed against the locked door with a force that burst it open. Geoffrey, on top and armed, had little difficulty in securing his bruised foe and marching him back to the library, where he now took the precaution of locking all the doors. Geoffrey, who had felt himself tingling with excitement and the natural love of the chase, now had time to wonder what he was going to do with his capture. He thought of the darkness, the storm, the absence of the two undermen, and the helplessness of the McFarlanes. Then he remembered the telephone, which fortunately stood in a closet off the library. He turned to the burglar. "Stand with your face to the wall and your hands up," he said. "And if I see you move, I'll just as life shoot you as look at you." With which warning, he approached the telephone and, still keeping an eye on the other, rang up Central. There was no answer. He rang again, 6, 7 times. He repeated the process unavailingly. He tried the private wire to the McFarlane cottage with no better result. At this point, the burglar spoke. "Oh, what the devil," he said mildly. "I can't stand here with my hands over my head all night." "You'll stand there," replied Geoffrey with some temper, "until I'm ready for you to move." "And when will that be?" "When this fool of a Central answers." "Oh, not as long as that, I hope," said the burglar, "because to tell the truth, I always cut the telephone wires before I enter a house." There was a pause in which it was well Geoffrey did not see the artless smile of satisfaction which wreathed the burglar's face. At length Geoffrey said, "Well, in that case you might as well sit down, for we seem likely to stay here until morning." He calculated that by that time Mrs. McFarlane, alarmed at his absence, would send someone to look for him, someone who could be used as a messenger to fetch the constable. To this suggestion the burglar appeared to acquiesce, for he sank at once into an armchair toward which Holland himself was making his way, knowing it to be the most comfortable for an all-night session. Feeling the absurdity of making any point of the matter, however, he contented himself with the sofa. "Take off your mask," he said as he sat down. "So I will, thank you," said the burglar, as if he had been asked to remove his hat, and with his left hand he slipped it off. The face that met Geoffrey's interested gaze was thin, yet ruddy, and tanned by exposure, so that his very light brilliant eyes flared oddly in so dark a surrounding. Above his sandy hair, which had receded somewhat from his forehead, curled up from his temples like a baby's. His upper lip was long, and with a pleasant mouth gave his face an expression of humour. His hands were ugly but small. They sat for some time without moving. The burglar engaged in bandaging the cut on his right hand with obvious indifference to Holland's presence. Geoffrey, meanwhile, studying him carefully. The process of bandaging over, the man reached out his hand toward the bookcase and, selecting a volume of Sterne, settled back comfortably in his chair. Holland stared at him an instant in wonder, and then attempted to follow his example. But his attention to his book was much less concentrated than that of his captive, whose expression soon showed him to be completely absorbed. They must have sat thus for an hour before the burglar began to show signs of restlessness. He asked if it were still snowing, and looked distinctively disturbed on being told it was. At last he broke the silence again. "You don't remember me, do you?" he said. Geoffrey slowly raised his eyes without moving, but his revolver was drooping in his right hand. He ran his mind over his criminal acquaintance unsuccessfully and repeated, "Remember you?" "Yes, we were at school together for a time." Geoffrey stared and then exclaimed spontaneously, "You used to be able to wag your ears." Can still." "Why? You are Skinny McVeigh." The man nodded. Neither was without a sense of humour, and yet saw nothing comic in these untender reminiscences. "I remember the masters all hated you," said Geoffrey. "But you were straight enough then, weren't you?" Again the man nodded. "I took to this sort of thing a month or so ago." After a moment, Geoffrey said, "Did not I hear you were in the Navy?" "No," said McVeigh. "I was at Annapolis for a few months. I had an idea I should like the Navy, but, heavens above, I could not stand the academy. They threw me out. It seems I had broken every rule they had ever made. It was worse than state's prison." "Are you in a position to judge?" asked Geoffrey coolly. "No," said McVeigh, as if he nevertheless had information on the subject. "Well, you will be soon," said Holland, not sorry for an opportunity to point out that his heart was not softened by recollections of his school days, but McVeigh appeared to ignore this intimation. "Yes," he said, ruminatively. "I've done a lot of things in my time." "Well, I don't want to hear about them," said Geoffrey, who had no intention of being drawn into an intimate interchange. The burglar looked more surprised than angered at this shortness, and only said, "Would you have any objection to my putting a match to that fire?" "No," said Geoffrey. And McVeigh, with wonderful dexterity, managed to start a cheery blaze with his left hand. For a few minutes, Geoffrey's determined attention to his book discouraged his companion. But presently, rapping the pages of Tristram Shandy with the back of his hand, he exclaimed, "Stern. Ah, there was a man. Something of my own type, too, it sometimes strikes me. Capable, you know, really a genius, but so unfortunately different from other people. Ordinary standards meant nothing to him. Too original, sees life from another standpoint entirely. That's me. I—" "Sit down," roared Geoffrey. "Oh, it's nothing, said McVeigh. "Only I talk better on my feet." "Well, you wouldn't talk as well with a bullet in you." McVeigh sank back again in his chair. "Yes," he said, "that's me." "Why, Holland, I have no doubt you would be surprised if you knew the number of things that I can do, that I'm really proficient in. Anything with the hands." He waved his fingers supplely in the air. "It's no trouble to me at all. I have at once a natural skill that most people take a lifetime to acquire. I'm told there's work for all where you are going." McVeigh looked a little trifle puzzled for an instant, but never allowing himself to remain at a loss, he said, "Work? Do you really mean to say that you believe in a utilitarian heaven where we are going to work with our hands, for my part?" "I had a reference to the penitentiary," said Geoffrey. "Oh, yes, of course, the penitentiary. There are some wonderful men in the penitentiary. You don't admit that, I suppose, with your conventional ideas, but to me they are just as admirable as any other great creative artist, sculptor, or financer. I see you don't quite get that. You are hemmed in by conventional standards and your possessions, and all the things to which you attach such great importance." "I don't attach so much importance that I steal them from other people," said Geoffrey. "Philistine, Holland, Philistine. Is not any one who has anything stealing from someone or other. Of course, but I see you don't catch the idea. Well, I dare say I would not either in your place. Rather think I would not. My sister is just the same. Sweet girl. Witty in her own way, but Philistine. She's so good as to be my companion, apparently on equal terms, in many ways my superior. But it would be impossible for me even to mention these ideas to her, ideas which are of the greatest interest to me. I wonder, said Geoffrey, how much of all this is rubbish you believe. MacVeigh smiled with great sweetness. I wonder myself, Holland. Still, it is undeniably amusing, and the main thing is that I enjoy life. A hard life, too, in many ways. Fate has dealt me some sad blows. Look at such a coincidence as your turning up tonight, of all nights in the year. It was scarcely a coincidence. I came. Oh, I know. You came to see after your sister's things, but still, if you look at it a little more carefully, you will see that it was a coincidence that you should be by nature a man of prompt action. 9 men out of 10 in your place still, I'm not depressed. You cannot say, Holland, that I behave or talk like a man who has 10 years of hard labour before him, can you? I dare say you never been thrown with a person who showed less anxiety. Yet, as a matter of fact, there is something preying on my mind, something entirely aside from anything you could imagine. You don't tell me, said Geoffrey, who did not know whether to be most amused or infuriated by his companion's conversation. I am about to tell you, said MacVeigh graciously. I am very seriously worried about my sister. In fact, I don't see that there is any getting away from it. You would have to let me go out for an hour or so and get her. Let you do what? Get my sister. She's living in a little hut in your woods, and I'm actually afraid she will be snowed up. It seems highly probable. Well, then I must go and get her. Geoffrey stared at him a moment and then said, You must be crazy. Maybe I am, answered MacVeigh, as if the suggestion were not without an amusing side. Maybe I am, but that is not the point. Think of a girl, Holland, alone all night in such a storm. Now I put it to you, it is not a position in which you would leave your sister, is it? Geoffrey began a sentence and, finding it inadequate, contented himself with a laugh. There, you see, said MacVeigh. It's out of the question. The place is draughty, too, though there is a stove. Do you remember the house at all? You would be surprised to see how nicely I fixed it up for her. No doubt I should, replied Holland, thinking of the Vaughan and Marheim valuables. It is surprisingly livable, but it is draughty, MacVeigh went on. The truth is, I ought to have gone south as I meant to do last week, but one cannot foresee everything. The winters have been open until Christmas so often lately. However, I made a mistake and I'm perfectly willing to rectify it. If you have no objection, I'll go and bring her back here. If you have any respect for your skin, you won't move from that chair. Oh, the devil, Holland, don't be so. He hesitated for the right word, not wishing to be unjust. So obtuse. Listen to that wind. It's cold here. Think what it must be in that shanty. Very unpleasant, I should think. More than that, suffering, I have no doubt. Why, she might freeze to death if anything went wrong with the fire. It's not safe. It's a distinct risk to leave her, let alone that a storm like this would scare any girl alone in a place like that. There is some danger to her life. Don't you see that? Yes, I see, returned Geoffrey, But you ought to have thought of that before you came burgling in a blizzard. Thought of it. Of course I thought of it. But I had no idea whatever of being caught with old MacFarlane laid up with the two boys away. It did seem about the safest job yet. There was a pause, for Geoffrey evidently had no intention of even arguing the matter, and presently McVeigh continued. Now you know you would feel badly tomorrow morning if anything went wrong with her, and you knew you could have helped it. Helped it, said Geoffrey. What do you mean? Let you loose on the country for the sake of a story no sane man would believe? Well, returned McVeigh judicially, perhaps you could not do that, but, he added brightly, you could go yourself. Yes, said Geoffrey, I could. Then I think you ought to be getting along. Upon my word, McVeigh, said Holland, you are something of a humorist, aren't you? McVeigh again looked puzzled, but rose to the occasion. Oh, hardly that, he said. Every now and then I have a way of putting things, a way of my own. I find often I am able to amuse people, but if you are cheerful yourself, you make other people so. I was just thinking that it must be a great thing for men who have been in prison for years to have someone come in with a new point of view. I'm sure you will be an addition to prison life. It's an ill wind, you know. It's an ill wind for my sister, literally enough. Come, Holland, you certainly can trust me. Do be starting. With what do you take me for? Said the exasperated Geoffrey. Do you really suppose that I am going looking for a den of your accomplices in order to give you a chance to escape? Accomplices? Exclaimed McVeigh, and for the first time a shade of anger crossed his brow. Accomplices? I have no accomplices. Anything I do, I think I'm able to do alone. Still, he added, putting aside his annoyance, if you feel nervous about leaving me, I'd just as lief give you my word of honour to stay here until you come back. You what? McVeigh made a slight gesture of his shoulders, as if he were being a good deal tired. Oh, anything you like, he said. I suppose you could lock me up in a closet. I don't think we need trouble to arrange the details, said Geoffrey dryly, but I'll tell you what I will do. After I get you safely in jail tomorrow, I'll get a trap and go and look up this hut. Join me. Join me in the next video of Christmas Story, New York Burglar and the Blizzard. Join me for the next video of Christmas Story and find out what's going on. Join me in the next video. See you then. Morale. Take care. Bye.